Hi everyone, welcome back to another podcast of #NoTapes, a podcast by Berita. I am your host Natasha, and co-hosting with me today is BH News Editor Hadi Saparin. How are you, Hadi?
Hi Natasha.
And we also have the privilege today to have with us Minister for Law and Home Affairs, Mr. K Shanmugam, to discuss and provide his perspective on this important issue. Minister, thank you for being with us here today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good.
Wonderful. And the three of us are in the studio today to talk about an issue which actually sparked an unfortunate incident. Before we begin, I'd like to say and send once again, our condolences to the family of our Singapore Police Force officer, the late Mr. Uvaraja Gopal. In the late July of 2023, Mr. Gopal was found at the foot of a residential block in Yishun. He had taken his own life, and he had left a note on social media explaining how he had to endure workplace bullying, racial discrimination, and family issues. And his death actually sparked an intense discussion on bullying and particularly racial discrimination. And there were some comments and follow-up posts from other former officers in the SPF who claimed that they too were victims of bullying and discrimination.
Yes. So, Minister, if we can jump straight into this topic, perhaps you can share with us some perspective to the safeguards, against discriminatory practice that are in place, and also how we can create a safe place, a safe environment, safe space for minorities in these instances.
Right. When I approach this, there are two aspects to this. One is as a system. Take Ministry of Home Affairs, Police Force as a command. You have SCDF, you have other organizations. As a system, is racism institutionalized? Is it systemic? Is it everywhere? Is it part and parcel of people's thinking? That's one aspect. The second aspect is, even if it is not systemic, there would be individual cases. So let me deal with both.
Mm-hmm.
The first and most important in my book is that it should not be part of the system. You cannot allow that. And the responsibility for that starts from the top, from me. And then it goes down through MHA management, down to Commissioner of Police, and then below. How do you make sure that it's not part of the system, that it is not something that's institutionalized? It's not that automatically people understand that they should not be racist and that it will not be allowed and that severe action will be taken. It's part of the training. It's, when you induct trainees right from the ground level to officer level, every aspect of training, it's got to be in there that you cannot be racist. In fact, you cannot be discriminatory. It's not okay to be discriminatory in other aspects either. So it's not just racism. If you have sexual harassment, if you make derogatory remarks based on religion, none of that is acceptable, right? So that's a starting point. Then, human nature being what it is, inevitably you will have individuals who could be racist, who could use bad language, who could do things which they shouldn't do. And you got to make sure you take action, investigate and take action. Because you cannot 100% stamp out individual bad behavior. What you can do is make sure the system is not like that. And I can say that the MHA system sets a strong face against discrimination and racism, discrimination on religion. And how do we do that? And how do we know we do that? All our aspects of training, management, incorporate that as a key facet. And, we can do all that, but how is it on the ground? Here we conduct very regular surveys, anonymous. So there are pulse surveys conducted twice a year. There are employee engagement surveys, and there is also a 360-degree survey by the junior officers on their senior officers. And since these are anonymous, if it is systemic, enough people will say, look, they have faced this sort of discrimination, and we would have picked it up. And I can say safely that that doesn't come up, racial discrimination. In all of these, I think one has got to look at the statistics rather than deal in generalities. So if you look at the 5 years from January 2019 up to now, how many cases have been reported? There have been 310 cases, and these cover all workplace issues. And if you look at Home Team, it has got 29,000 officers. So that's about 1.1%. Now, out of the 310 cases, 6 were on racial discrimination. And of the 6, after investigations, we found that 3 were substantiated and action was taken. Right? 3 were not substantiated. So 6 for 29,000 officers. So that gives you a sense of the proportion. And we address different issues. For example, more recently, there was a case where a male officer used inappropriate language, sexually explicit language towards a female officer. Action was going to be taken against him. Disciplinary proceedings was started. He resigned. There was another officer who used vulgarities, expletives towards another officer. Action was taken. He was warned. 3, another recent case, senior officer borrowed money from junior officers, didn't pay back. We actually generally don't even like the fact that senior officers borrow, and that's not something that we really encourage. But not paid back, and action is being taken. I think whenever we have these issues, it's useful to go back to data. So 310 cases in 5.5 years, of which 6 were on race related, of which 3 were made out, action was taken. And the employee engagement surveys, pulse surveys, all the anonymous surveys don't throw it up as a major issue or even as an issue. That doesn't mean we sit back and say, oh, we are good. You've got to continuously make sure that this is drummed in. Yeah.
But Minister, just a short follow-up question to that. Sometimes the line between institutions and individuals can be blurred in some instances, you know. So how do we ensure that safe space beyond surveys and all are in place?
It's absolutely essential that beyond surveys, and maybe I should have mentioned it earlier, there is a right to complain, and complaints will be confidential. People can complain to any level and within the organization, and if they feel that no proper action has been taken, they can go direct to appeal to the Human Resources Department of Ministry of Home Affairs, and if they feel that that's not adequate, they can go to the head of civil service. So there's those channels, and at my level, we can also set up independent review panels to investigate whether something has gone wrong. So there are a number of ways in which complaints can be made and will be investigated. So it's not just surveys. Surveys is there are 2 parts to this, right? One is surveys is proactive, the institution checking on its own health and making sure that it's healthy. But there are also the reactive. When people have an issue, how do they bring it up? Is there a safe way of making complaints? Will complaints be dealt with? And how can they escalate it? So you've got to have a clear, safe process for that. And there is.
Okay. So do you think that having these safe spaces and ability for these officers to actually share, it has allowed them to be confident that whatever they share is something that will be taken that will be people will take it seriously in that sense.
That's what our surveys show. That because if it is not going to be taken seriously, or if it is not taken seriously, or if there's a perception that it's not taken seriously, that would have shown up in the pulse surveys as a major issue. Second, they can see that the fact that there are only 6 cases that have been complained about, and they can see half of them action was taken when we found that it was merited. I'm only talking about racial discrimination cases. There are other cases too. And some we take action where we investigate and we find no basis for the allegation. Of course, it's different.
Okay, so that is the case in the home team specifically,
Yes.
right? Maybe you can share your views on the state of racial and religious discrimination in Singapore. Like, has it become something that has more attention recently with this case being shared online and everything?
I would put it this way: how do we handle race and religion in our country? And for me, the starting point is always a quote by Mr. Lee soon after we got independence, 9th August 1965. He made this point that we are not I'm paraphrasing, we are not a Chinese country, we are not a Malay country, we are not an Indian country. We are Singaporeans. Singapore is based on a very strong idea, the idea of equality of the races, meritocracy, everyone has equal opportunities. And that powerful idea stands in stark contrast to, say, what happens in many parts of the world, including this region, where so much of politics and economics and every aspect of life is governed by your skin color, who you are. And your skin color then dictates how much benefit you get from the state or what opportunities you get. That doesn't happen here. There is, and I've said this, there is an advantage to being part of the majority race in Singapore. There is, however, no positive or negative discrimination in favor of one race or another, unlike what you see elsewhere. And there's equality of opportunities, regardless of race, language, or religion, for housing, education, healthcare, and all the opportunities that a society can give. If you take the Malay community, for example, which and I follow these data very closely. You look at the census data from 2010 to 2020. University graduates from 2010. 5.5%, now 10.8%, double. Per capita household income grew at 3% per annum in real terms, which is higher than other ethnic groups. 3.3% in real terms means plus inflation. And then employment today, 40% are in PMET jobs, up from 30% 10 years ago in 2010. So nearly 1 in 2. If I were to put it in blunt terms, let's take the average Malay person in Singapore and compare him or her with the average Malay person in Malaysia, which has positive discrimination. An average Malay person today in Singapore, 2/3, 66%, live in 4-room flats or bigger. In Singapore, I think if you live in 4-room or bigger, you have some equity, which is usually a 6-figure sum, which belongs to you. You are 1 in 2 almost has got a PMET job, particularly the younger groups. So if you compare that profile with the average Malay person in Malaysia, the potential for our Malay population is much higher. They are much better educated, they have better jobs, they have more assets, and they can look forward to a better career. Just as a comparison. Now, that doesn't mean the work is done. There is still a lot more to do because there is still a gap between their performance and the performance, for example, of the Chinese. And we recognize this openly, say it as it is, and then put in more effort. So, for example, MQ, various ground level initiatives, those are all important. And as a society, we need to be very focused on making sure that we deal with both the positive and the negative. What do I mean? you have to have clear laws that prevent discrimination, hate speech. So many things that you say in Singapore for which you will be pulled up in other countries, whether in the West or the East, is nothing. You remember the Polytechnic lecturer, Chinese Polytechnic lecturer who said, verbally abused a mixed race couple. He lost his job. He was charged. He went to jail. Won't happen anywhere else. You had a chap, a Malay man, pretending to be a Chinese girl, making nasty remarks on emails, websites about Indians and Malays. He was found out, charged, went to jail. You had a Chinese who put up a graffiti on some MRT station about Malay Mati. We traced him, charged him. He went to jail. He got caned as well. Okay, so we are very serious about this. So this tells you, see, 95% of society, you and I, most of us, don't need these laws to prevent us from saying nasty things. But 5% will. And if you allow the 5% to do it, then that will become 10%. And then it will become the norm, as it is in most places under the guise of free speech. We don't allow that. So it is, people, particularly minorities, can go about knowing that they're not going to be abused for their skin color or their religion, race. And other personal characteristics too. So we have amended the law to broaden it. So that's the framework. But that tells you what you cannot do. That alone is not going to be enough to make you like each other or come together as one in society. For that, you need additional things. You need the government to work closely with the people to try and create a framework for people to understand each other across the races and live with each other in some harmony and work together. How do we do that? Of course, the ethnic integration policy in the housing estates. So you have to live together, certain proportions. The schools are integrated, then workplaces are integrated, and a lot of community activities, people's association. People underestimate the importance of this, but in every housing estate, residents, committees, the CCCs, they come together, they bring the Malays, Indians, Chinese regularly. And when you interact, you go on bus tours, you do things together, you take part in each other's festivals, you have a greater appreciation. So that builds the deep links at the very foundational level. And so there's a legal framework of what you cannot do. If you did all of this, the police will come after you. And then within that, build linkages. That is why our society looks so different from other societies. That is why, say, in 2020, there were also these, more allegations came up. There were some racist remarks made, and then there were some racist incidents. So I asked for the statistics. 60 police reports for a population of 5.2, 5.3 million in Singapore, apart from residents and PRs. Citizens 3.2 million, PRs another 500,000, and the rest are sort of foreign workers and so on. 60 police reports based on racial incidents. That's like 1.2 for every 100,000, or 0.01%. And since then, the numbers are much down. So you got to take it in context. We have 1 million households in Singapore living right next to each other in HDB flats. So within that context, these are the number of police reports. So take it in context. Yes, every incident has got to be looked at carefully, but overall, is the state of racial relationships healthy or not healthy? There you got to go back to these statistics. And very important piece of legislation, workplace fairness legislation. This requires employers of a certain size not to discriminate against employees based on personal characteristics, which would include race and religion. Job requirements, that kind of thing. But other than that, in normal establishments, there is this very powerful legislation which is coming through, which is a signal to employers and people in the working together that certain things are not acceptable, and there are remedies that are put forward. So we have to put both together. We have to work very hard to make sure that people appreciate each other, celebrate each other, or at least tolerate each other at the minimum, and at the same time are very clear what they cannot say and what they cannot do. So individual cases, Yuvaraja's case is a very sad case. I think racism, there was allegation that somebody called him Kalinkya, which is not acceptable, and that was investigated. It's being investigated again, because one half of the story is his allegation, the other half is got to listen to what the others have to say. I've given instructions to give this utmost attention, and it will come to me, and we will go and discuss this publicly. There's no place for racism, but it's one of the allegations. He had various other allegations, and you have also seen the police statement in response, which I think seems to highlight, in all fairness, we wanted to tell the family, these are the other aspects. There were a number of issues. From the police statement, you can see that police have been trying to help him with his issues, counseling, various other types of assistance. And we will look at everything he has said, and we will give an account, and then the public can have a better sense. We will deal with this seriously. Yeah.
I guess we look forward to that as a closure for the family as well. But Minister, just on the point of, I think most rational Singaporeans, most Singaporeans will acknowledge that the race relations are healthy, and the fact that there are a lot of, even this legislation that are recently introduced, even MOM data shows that cases are very small. The numbers are very small, yet we are taking such a big step in legislating it. So so healthy, and government is taking a very strong approach.
Want to always be proactive.
Yes. But sometimes race relations are not so clear-cut. Issues regarding race and religion not so clear-cut. So how do we navigate this? Because speaking about race and religious issues sometimes can be quite intimidating for people. They know where the discussion will go towards. So how do we navigate it, especially in this world that we live in, that's so polarized and changing all the time?
There are many structures which are provided for by NGOs as well as PA and other sort of institutions for people to come together and discuss race. SMS Janil leads onepeople.sj, where he discusses issues of race very in much detail for those who have an interest, and there is nothing to prevent people from coming together to discuss it at all, discuss it in ways in which they want to. I would just say have a care, because it can easily go off into an attack against each other, and we need to be careful, because that can tear our social fabric. And we do have 74% Chinese, 15% Malays, 8% Indians, so distinct communities, and then others, Eurasians as well. And we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, and we need to have continuous discussions on race to have that awareness, so that people don't just forget about it and slip into patterns of behavior. So they need to be aware. We need to build up conventions which make it clear it must be automatic that there are certain things you don't say, certain things you don't do, and that it's the right thing to do. You don't do not just because of the law, but you don't want to do it. It's got to be internalized. And that, I think we have moved a long way from, say, where we were in 1965 or 1975 to now, where I would say it's now become the convention. So you don't need the laws for most people to avoid being racist. And we got to continue to work at it. And as I said, we got to move from there. And I think we have moved to celebrating each other's culture, because as Singaporeans, together with our different cultures and celebrations and languages and religions, we can actually be stronger.
Yeah.
It brings different perspectives together.
Wonderful.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So basically what you're saying is it's the melting pot of cultures in Singapore is actually important, and
Yeah.
it makes us what Singapore is, right?
I would use a different word from melting pot, because melting pot could mean that we all become the same or look alike.
Okay.
I would say it's like they used to make this analogy. You know, you toss together a salad. Say you put it together, but each one has its own flavor. We are all Singaporean first, but you celebrate Hari Raya.
Yep.
I celebrate Deepavali or Thaipusam. So you can understand what I celebrate, I can understand what you celebrate, and we can be happy for you, you can be happy for me. You know, Chinese celebrate different festivals, we can see, and to the extent that we feel comfortable, and I hope more of us feel comfortable, we should also take part in the celebrations, particularly if they are cultural and not religious. And, you know, thankfully in Singapore, we don't have a situation where many people feel, oh, I cannot go into this religious institution. Say a wedding is taking place in a temple or a church. People don't feel, oh, I cannot go there. Some people may feel, but we need to create a bigger and bigger common space where people feel comfortable. And you can have, as in South Bridge Road, a mosque, a temple, a church, you know, somewhere nearby, a synagogue, and people feel completely comfortable going into each of these and safe. And come out, you're still a Singaporean. You do national service, you work together, you have your proportionate number of MPs who are Malays and Indians in Parliament, you have a place in the sun, and you have good schooling, good housing, and you have leaders who are actively thinking about this. It's none of this is to be taken for granted. It can easily change, as you see from the West and from countries around the region. Yeah. So not quite a melting pot.
We're
Melting pot
different
means
individuals.
melting
that
pot
makes
means all of us are gone together and we create one dish.
Okay.
We
you
don't
have
want
a
that.
point. You have a
We
point.
want our distinct flavors.
Alright.
We want,
the
but you know,
curry.
speaking Malay, speaking Chinese, speaking Tamil or other Indian languages, and at the
Differences,
same time being able to converse in English, and
Okay.
celebrating our different cultures,
Yeah.
and drawing strength from your roots and creating at the same time a common Singaporean identity. That's what makes us successful.
Okay. So, I mean, race and race relations will continue to be a work in progress.
Yes,
Yes?
it will always be a work in progress.
Yes, yes. So, indeed, from time to time, there will be, you know, some
Time to
incidents,
time there will be
that we
incidents.
have to tackle.
So, well, I should say 60 police reports in a year where there are heightened sensitivities, and it's probably come down now.
Yeah.
If it goes up to, say, 600, then I
There's
would
an
say
issue,
there
huh?
is a problem.
Then we will invite you again for another podcast.
No. Hopefully, we would have taken action before.
Yes.
By the time from 60 it goes to 90, we would have taken action. Yeah.
Okay, maybe just to wrap up this podcast today, I think we talked about you know, tackling this as a society, and like PM Lee Hsien Loong actually mentioned in his National Day rally speech, right? It's our mutual trust that has become the bedrock of our success.
Yes.
And like today's discussion, I feel can only add to this process of building trust among the different races within the society. Thank you so much, Minister and Hadi, for joining me today. Maybe we'll hope to see you in another episode of Hashtag No Topics.
If you invite, I will come.
All right, he
Thank
said
you.
it on record.
We will.
We
Thank
will.
you, Minister.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.